Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we plunge into complex topics, distill them into essential knowledge, and hand you the shortcuts to becoming truly well-informed. Today, we're diving into a truly fascinating convergence, the intertwining worlds of the brain and artificial intelligence. You might think of them as separate, distinct things, but what if they're not just connected? What if they're deeply, reciprocally influencing each other in ways that are, well, radically changing both fields?
It's a relationship that goes back decades, truly. Each field has been inspiring and really accelerating the other's progress. What's truly remarkable is how these fundamental insights we've gleaned from the biological brain have profoundly guided the very design and evolution of AI. And now we're seeing these incredibly powerful AI tools revolutionizing our understanding of the brain itself. It's a dynamic feedback loop, really, a conversation between biology and computation.
Right. So our mission today is to unpack this intricate relationship, exploring both sides of this incredible coin. We'll start by digging into how neuroscience has inspired some of AI's biggest breakthroughs. From the foundational idea of artificial neurons right up to complex attention mechanisms. Then we'll flip the script entirely. We'll see how cutting-edge AI is now the neuroscientist's most powerful new microscope for understanding the brain's astonishing complexities. It's allowing us to decode its secrets at a scale we've never seen before. We'll look at the current state of the art across these convergent fields, and crucially, maybe peek into what the next 5 to 10 years might hold as this synergy deepens.
Exactly. Our goal is to give you a clear, comprehensive understanding of this incredibly dynamic frontier. We want to highlight those genuine aha moments and surprising facts that make this convergence so compelling. And we'll try to do it all without getting bogged down in overly technical jargon. Keep it conversational, engaging. By the end, you should have a much richer appreciation for how far we've come, the incredible potential this synergy holds, and perhaps even a deeper sense of what intelligence itself truly means.
Okay, let's unpack this. So if we're talking about AI in the brain, I guess it all has to start with the very idea of an artificial neuron, right? The fundamental building block of AI as we know it. And this concept, surprisingly, isn't new at all. It goes way back.
Way back, 1943, believe it or not, nearly 80 years ago. Two brilliant minds, McCulloch and Pitts, proposed the first mathematical model of a neuron. They were essentially trying to mimic the brain's logical behavior, reducing a biological neuron, with all its complexity, down to a mathematical function.
Wow. So that really laid the absolutely foundational groundwork for what we now call artificial neural networks.
It was a truly crucial conceptual step. It showed that complex logical operations, the kind we thought happened in the brain, could actually be modeled computationally. And then a bit later, 1958, Frank Rosenblatt took it from theory to, well, a tangible machine. His invention, the perceptron.
The perceptron, right.
And what's genuinely fascinating here is that he explicitly modeled this early neural network, which was designed for image recognition, by the way, after the eye's retina and the brain's neurons. So right from the very start, the notion of a digital brain that could learn was born directly from studying the biological one, trying to replicate its functions, even if it was quite simplistic back then.
That makes perfect sense. So we have these artificial neurons, these basic building blocks. But what's the secret sauce? How do you make them learn? Does the brain give us a blueprint there too?
It absolutely does. And this takes us to another groundbreaking idea from neuroscience, one that's almost become a mantra in the field. Donald Hebb's 1949 theory, famously summarized as cells that fire together, wire together.
Ah, yes, I've heard that.
Yeah.
Fire together, wire together.
It's simple, but incredibly profound. It really captures the essence of learning at the synaptic level, within the brain.
So wire together literally means strengthening the connections between those neurons.
Exactly. That concept, Hebbian plasticity, posits that connections between neurons get stronger when they're active at the same time, meaning they're involved in processing the same piece of information together. Artificial neural networks mimic this basic principle. They adjust connection weights, the strength of the links between artificial neurons based on the input data and the desired output. When two artificial neurons frequently co-activate to produce a correct result, the weight of their connection increases. This allows the network to learn and adapt, reinforcing successful patterns. Much like Hebb proposed for biological neurons, it's a really fundamental learning rule.
Okay, this is where it gets really captivating for me. Think about how we see things. Your brain doesn't just get a flood of pixels, right? It processes visual information in layers. It starts with simple stuff like lines and edges, and then builds up to more complex objects. I remember learning about Hubel and Weissel, the neuroscientists who showed this back in the 60s.
Yes, exactly. David Hubel and Torsten Wiesel, their Nobel Prize-winning work on the mammalian visual cortex was truly seminal. They showed precisely that how neurons in different layers of the visual pathway responded to increasingly complex features. Simple cells for lines, complex cells for orientations, and so on, up the hierarchy.
And that biological insight, that hierarchical processing, directly inspired a huge leap in AI, didn't it? Especially in computer vision.
It absolutely did. It led to Kunihiko Fukushima, a Japanese computer scientist, designing the neocognitron back in 1980. This was a multi-layered neural network that explicitly mirrored the hierarchical processing Hubel and Wiesel observed. It used localized filters and pooling, kind of like receptive fields in the brain. It was, in essence, an early convolutional neural network.
So the precursor to what we use today.
Pretty much. Decades later, deep convolutional neural networks, or CNNs, like the famous AlexNet in 2012, which really kicked off the deep learning revolution, use these same brain-inspired principles, localized filters, hierarchical feature extraction, and they achieved human-level image recognition in major competitions. It wasn't just a cool parallel, it fundamentally showed that mimicking even a simplified model of how our visual system works could unlock incredible AI capabilities. It transformed computer vision forever.
So artificial neural networks are clearly brain-inspired then, no question.
Yeah.
But are they direct copies? Are we talking about actually replicating the brain? Or is it more like borrowing some good ideas? How close are they really?
That's a really important distinction to make. They are definitely not direct copies. Not at all. There's some very significant differences, and exploring those differences is actually a big area of ongoing research. For one thing, biological neurons are vastly more complex. Just think about one neuron integrating signals from thousands of other neurons through synapses with intricate dynamics. They fire these discrete electrical pulses or spikes in complex patterns.
Right, not just a simple number calculation.
Exactly. Whereas typical artificial neurons are quite simplified. They usually perform a straightforward weighted sum of their inputs and then apply a mathematical activation function. Most of them are non-spiking. And the learning part is different too. Our brains learn via complex biochemical processes, often involving local changes at the synapse, influenced by various factors. Most ANNs, on the other hand, learn via backpropagation.
Backpropagation, okay.
Yeah, it's an algorithm that propagates error signals globally, backwards through the entire network to adjust all the weights. It's incredibly effective for training AI. It's the workhorse of deep learning, but it's not biologically plausible. We don't know of a mechanism like that in the brain.
So it works, but it's not how we work.
Pretty much. This discrepancy is a fascinating challenge, but the core fact remains. ANNs, the cornerstone of modern AI, fundamentally stem from our earliest attempts to understand how networks of biological neurons could give rise to intelligence. The inspiration is undeniable.
Okay, so if conventional ANNs are simplified, what about AI that tries to be even more biologically faithful, maybe getting closer to the actual pulse, the timing of how brain cells communicate?
That's exactly where spiking neural networks, or SNNs, come into the picture. As we mentioned, real neurons communicate using these discrete electrical pulses, spikes. It's not just about if a neuron fires, but when it fires. SNNs try to mimic this event-driven, timing-based communication. Information is encoded not just in the rate of firing, but in the precise timing and patterns of these spikes relative to each other.
So it's more about the rhythm and timing, like Morse code, rather than just the volume.
That's a good analogy. It's much more true to how biological brains seem to encode temporal patterns and process information dynamically over time. This makes SNNs arguably a more biologically plausible type of neural network.
And this approach, mimicking the spikes, leads us directly to something called neuromorphic computing, which honestly sounds like something straight out of science fiction, building computer chips that are like mini brains.
It does sound futuristic, but it's very real. Neuromorphic computing is all about designing hardware actual silicon chips that tries to physically replicate the brain's architecture and, crucially, its incredible energy efficiency. Take IBM's True North chip from back in 2014. It was a research project, but it packed 1 million digital spiking neurons and around 256 million synapses onto a chip. And it operated on only about 70 milliwatts of power.
70 milliwatts, that's tiny. Less than a smartphone display on low brightness.
Exactly. Similarly, Intel's Loihi research processor, and now Luhi 2, aims for fast, low-power AI by implementing networks of spiking neurons directly in silicon, complete with local learning rules, trying to mimic synaptic plasticity on the chip itself.
Hmm.
These systems are a fundamental departure from traditional computer architectures. They replicate key neural principles: massive parallelism, memory co-located right next to the processing units to avoid data bottlenecks, and asynchronous event-driven operation, meaning parts of the chip only consume power when they're actively processing a spike.
That energy efficiency difference is just staggering.
Yeah.
Our own brains run on, what, about 20 watts? Like a dim light bulb. While the supercomputer training a large AI model can chew through kilowatts, maybe even megawatts.
Yeah.
Why is chasing this brain-like energy efficiency so strategically important for the future of AI? What's the end game?
Look, the motivation is hugely strategic. Natural brains are simply orders of magnitude more energy efficient and adaptable than our current computers for many complex real-world tasks. Think about it. A big AI data center is like a massive factory running full blast, consuming enormous power continuously. The brain is more like a highly distributed network of specialized workshops. Only the relevant parts light up precisely when needed. It's incredibly frugal. By copying these brain principles in silicon, the parallelism, the co-located memory, the event-driven asynchronous operation, researchers hope to achieve truly energy-efficient AI. This is absolutely crucial for edge computing.
Edge computing meaning AI running on the device itself.
Exactly. Things like robotics, autonomous vehicles, smart sensors, maybe even sophisticated wearable devices or implants. Anywhere power is limited, but you still need real-time adaptive learning. Neuromorphic systems offer a potential path towards that.
So are SNNs and neuromorphic chips the definite future of AI then? Or are there still big hurdles to overcome before they can really compete with the standard deep learning models that dominate today?
They definitely face challenges. The biggest one has traditionally been training them effectively. Remember how we talked about backpropagation needing smooth signals to work? Well, the spiking function in SNNs is inherently non-differentiable. It's either a spike or no spike, a 1 or a 0. That makes it hard to calculate the precise adjustments needed for learning using standard methods.
Right, it's hard to know how much to adjust the connections if the signal is just on or off.
Exactly. But research is incredibly active here. People are exploring biologically plausible learning rules like those based on spike timing that work locally at the synapse. Others are developing clever ways to convert traditionally trained ANNs into SNNs for efficient inference on neuromorphic hardware. And there have been breakthroughs. A fairly recent milestone, for instance, demonstrated a spiking neural network performing true backpropagation directly on-chip on Intel's Loihi 2 processor. That starts to bridge the gap between the power of deep learning algorithms and the efficiency of neuromorphic hardware. So while not dominant yet, SNNs and neuromorphic computing could be vital for deploying AI in power-constrained environments and for building models that capture the temporal dynamics of neural processes with much greater fidelity. It's a really exciting space to watch.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. We've all experienced how our attention works, right? How we can focus on one conversation in a noisy room or zero in on a specific detail in a complex scene. How did that very human cognitive function get translated into AI and become so powerful?
That's another fantastic example of neuroscience insight driving AI progress. Decades of research in neuroscience and psychology have shaped our understanding of attention. In the human brain, attention is fundamentally seen as a mechanism for allocating limited processing resources. Our visual cortex, for instance, doesn't process every single pixel of a scene in high detail all at once. It selects and prioritizes.
It focuses on what's important or maybe what's surprising.
Precisely. Guided by eye movements, expectations, and the task at hand. Computational neuroscientists even proposed models like saliency maps back in the 90s, suggesting how the brain might highlight important regions in the visual field to guide where we look next. These biological and psychological insights were directly picked up by AI researchers.
So AI models literally learn to pay attention to the most relevant parts of the data instead of trying to process everything equally. That sounds like a huge efficiency gain, and maybe makes them more robust too.
Exactly. It was a key realization. One of the early breakthroughs came in 2014 with a model by Menni and colleagues. They introduced what they called a hard attention mechanism. The network learned to sequentially select specific patches or regions of an image to look at, kind of mimicking human eye movements, saccades, in order to classify the image more efficiently. It didn't need to process the whole image in detail.
Okay, so like zooming in on the important bits.
Kind of. Then, in 2015, Huzhu and others developed soft attention. This was a smoother, differentiable mechanism, meaning it worked well with backpropagation. It allowed image captioning networks, for instance, to dynamically focus on different parts of an image as they generated the descriptive words. So if it was generating the word dog, it would attend strongly to the dog pixels. If it generated frisbee, it would shift its attention to the frisbee.
Wow, that's directly analogous to how we might describe a picture, focusing on different elements as we talk about them.
It really is. It showed that letting the model learn where to look based on the context was incredibly powerful.
And this whole line of thinking, this idea of attention, eventually culminated in something absolutely massive in AI today, right? Something that underpins many of the most powerful models we hear about, like GPT.
Yes, absolutely. This thread of research directly led to the development of the transformer architecture, introduced in that landmark 2017 paper, Attention is All You Need. Now, while the transformer wasn't explicitly derived from a specific brain circuit diagram, its core mechanism, self-attention, conceptually echoes cognitive attention principles very strongly. In transformers, different parts of the input data, like words in a sentence, can dynamically calculate how relevant they are to each other. They effectively reweight their connections based on content relevance, much like how neuroscientists think neurons might selectively amplify or prioritize important signals within the brain based on context.
So it learns the relationships and dependencies within the data itself.
Exactly. This self-attention mechanism allowed models to capture long-range dependencies in data, understanding how words far apart in a sentence relate to each other, for example, leading to unprecedented performance in natural language processing and becoming the backbone of today's large language models and even revolutionizing computer vision with vision transformers.
So what's the big takeaway here? Why does the story of attention in AI, which started with brain insights, matter so much for understanding this convergence?
It matters hugely because the spectacular rise of attention mechanisms in AI was directly enabled by those earlier neuroscience and cognitive science insights. The very notion that selectively filtering and focusing information is crucial for efficient and effective processing came from studying us. But the synergy is now flowing back the other way, too. These powerful AI models, like transformers, are now being used as tools or even hypotheses for neuroscience. Researchers are comparing the attention maps inside a transformer, which parts of the input it focuses on, to actual recordings of brain activity during attention tasks, looking for common principles. Are the brain's parietal and frontal networks implementing something computationally similar? It's a really exciting reciprocal intellectual exchange, driving both fields forward.
Okay, let's talk about learning from consequences. We learn from rewards and punishments our whole lives. It shapes pretty much everything we do. AI learns this way, too, through something called reinforcement learning, or RL. How deep are the connections between AI's RL and our understanding of biology and psychology?
Oh, the connections are incredibly deep. Reinforcement learning as a branch of AI has its roots firmly planted in behavioral psychology and neuroscience. The core idea of RL, an agent learning through trial and error to maximize some cumulative reward signal over time, comes directly from classic animal learning theories. Think of Edward Thorndike's law of effect from the early 20th century, or B.F. Skinner's work on operant conditioning. These were foundational observations about how animals, including humans, learn to associate their actions with positive or negative outcomes.
Right. The rat presses a lever and gets food, so it presses the lever more. Basic stuff, but fundamental.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really fascinating from a neuroscience perspective. What did scientists discover in the brain that provided a tangible biological basis for these RL theories? This was a truly remarkable discovery in the 1990s, primarily by Wolfram Schultz and his colleagues. They were studying dopamine neurons in the midbrain of monkeys, and they found that the activity of these dopamine neurons encodes something incredibly specific, a reward prediction error signal.
Reward prediction error, what does that mean exactly?
It means the neurons signal the difference between the reward an animal expected to get and the reward it actually received. So these dopamine neurons fire strongly when an outcome is better than expected, a positive surprise, a positive prediction error. They actually suppress their firing below baseline when an expected reward fails to appear a negative surprise, a negative prediction error. And they maintain their normal baseline firing rate when things go exactly as predicted.
Wow, so it's not just signaling reward, it's signaling surprise about the reward.
Precisely. And as Schultz famously pointed out, this signal has the formal characteristics of a teaching signal postulated by reinforcement learning theories. Algorithms like TD learning and Q learning, developed in AI, rely fundamentally on calculating and using exactly this kind of prediction error signal to update their internal values and policies.
So neuroscience basically found the brain's implementation of a core concept from AI theory. That's incredible validation.
It was a beautiful moment of convergence. It showed that the abstract mathematical ideas developed in AI for how an agent could learn optimally from rewards were actually instantiated in the neurochemistry of the brain.
So biology didn't just inspire the initial idea of learning from rewards. Neuroscience literally helped refine and improve AI reinforcement learning itself by showing us how the brain might actually implement these principles.
Absolutely. Beyond just validating the core reward prediction error idea, neuroscience has inspired critical extensions and refinements within RL. For instance, the concept of intrinsic motivation, think of curiosity, exploration, novelty-seeking behavior we see in animals and humans, has been incorporated into RL agents to encourage them to explore their environment even without immediate external rewards. Another example is hierarchical reinforcement learning, which reflects how animals and humans seem to break down complex goals into smaller subgoals and learn action sequences at multiple levels of abstraction. Neuroscience studies of the prefrontal cortex and basal ganglia provided inspiration for these more sophisticated RL architectures.
Can you give us some really vivid examples of this back and forth? I know DeepMind, for instance, has been very explicit about using neuroscience inspiration.
DeepMind is a perfect example, yes. They have actively fostered this cross-pollination. One classic case is their DeepQ network, DQN, the algorithm that famously learned to play Atari games at a superhuman level back in 2013-2015. A key component of DQN was experience replay.
Experience replay, what's that?
It's basically storing the agent's past experiences, state, action, reward, next state in a memory buffer, and then randomly sampling batches of these past experiences to train the network rather than just training on the most recent experience. This breaks the correlation between consecutive experiences and improves data efficiency. And the inspiration for this came directly from the neuroscience concept of hippocampal replay.
Hippocampal replay. That's when the brain replays memories during sleep or rest.
Exactly. Neuroscientists observed that during rest, place cells in the hippocampus often fire in sequences corresponding to paths the animal recently traveled, or even paths it might take in the future. It's thought to be crucial for memory consolidation and planning. DeepMind took that biological idea and implemented a simplified version in their AI, and it dramatically improved performance and stability. More recently, DeepMind's work on navigation in complex environments drew inspiration from grid cells.
Grid cells, right. Those neurons in the entorhinal cortex that fire in that amazing hexagonal pattern as an animal moves around, creating a kind of internal GPS map.
Precisely. They are thought to provide a spatial coordinate system for the brain. DeepMind researchers designed an RL agent and specifically rewarded it if its internal representations started to resemble the geometric structure of grid cells. And remarkably, the agent spontaneously developed grid-like representations in its artificial neural network, and this significantly improved its navigation performance, especially its ability to measure distances and find shortcuts.
So the AI didn't just use the idea, it actually rediscovered a brain-like solution because it was computationally useful for the task.
Exactly. It suggests that grid cells might represent a particularly efficient or optimal way to encode spatial information, something that both evolution and AI optimization converged upon.
It's a truly synergistic cycle then, isn't it? Neuroscience provides the blueprint or inspiration. AI builds on it, often achieving amazing results. And then sometimes the AI systems themselves help neuroscientists test their theories or even discover new computational principles that might be happening in the brain. It's a strategically powerful feedback loop.
It really is a virtuous cycle driving progress on both fronts.
Okay, now let's completely flip the perspective. We've spent a good amount of time on how the brain inspires AI. But how is AI, in turn, helping us understand the brain itself? You mentioned the brain is maybe the most complex object in the universe. Analyzing it must present just an immense data challenge.
You're absolutely right. The sheer scale and complexity of neural data are staggering. Think about it. A single functional MRI scan of a human brain can generate millions of data points reflecting blood flow changes over time. And if you zoom down to the microscopic level, just 1 cubic millimeter of brain tissue about the size of a pinhead can contain tens of thousands of neurons, each connected to thousands of others, resulting in maybe 500 million synaptic connections in that tiny volume.
500 million connections in a pinhead-sized piece of brain.
Exactly. Trying to find meaningful patterns in that kind of data using traditional statistical methods is incredibly difficult, if not impossible. This is where AI algorithms, especially deep learning, really shine. They excel at finding complex, subtle, high-dimensional patterns and relationships within these overwhelming datasets. They can make sense of signals that would just look like noise to us, or find correlations across vast numbers of variables that traditional methods would miss. AI is becoming an indispensable tool for modern neuroscience.
So what are some of the most practical, maybe even immediate applications of AI in medical diagnosis related to the brain? Where is it making a real-world difference for patients right now?
The applications are already quite significant and rapidly growing, moving from research labs into clinical practice. Deep convolutional networks, for example, the same kind used for image recognition, can be trained to detect incredibly subtle abnormalities in medical images like MRI or CT scans. They can spot tiny tumors, early signs of lesions like those in multiple sclerosis, or markers of neurodegeneration associated with diseases like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. Often, these AI systems can achieve accuracy comparable to, or sometimes even exceeding, that of expert human radiologists for specific diagnostic tasks.
So they can act like a second pair of eyes, or
Yeah.
even catch things a human might miss.
Precisely. Machine learning models can also sift through the complex patterns of brain activity measured by fMRI or EEG. They might find multivariate signatures linked to psychiatric disorders like depression or schizophrenia, predict patient outcomes after a stroke based on initial scan data, or help differentiate between different types of dementia. This is leading to the development of powerful AI-assisted diagnostic tools. They can help streamline the diagnostic process, potentially enabling earlier detection and intervention, which is often critical for neurological conditions. Ultimately, this helps patients get the right diagnosis and the right care faster.
This leads to a really profound question, one that feels like it's straight out of science fiction. Can AI actually decode what someone is seeing or maybe even thinking just by looking at their brain activity? Is that actually happening today?
It sounds like science fiction, but in cognitive neuroscience, the field of neural decoding, or representation analysis, has been absolutely revolutionized by AI. And the answer is increasingly yes, to a startling degree. A really striking example came out in 2022 from research by Takagi and colleagues in Japan. They recorded brain activity from participants using fMRI while the participants looked at various images. Then they used the brain activity data to guide a powerful generative AI model similar to Stable Diffusion, which can create images from text descriptions.
Wait, they fed brain activity into an image-generating AI?
Essentially, yes. They used the fMRI data to condition the AI model, and what they found was astonishing. The AI could reconstruct high-resolution images that closely resemble the pictures the participants were actually viewing, solely based on their brain activity patterns in the visual cortex.
That's absolutely mind-blowing. The AI could literally see what was in the person's mind's eye, at least for visual perception.
It truly is. The reconstructed images weren't perfect copies, but they captured the semantic content and often the key visual features uncannily well. It was a stunning demonstration. Similarly, other research groups are using AI, often large language models, to decode speech, either spoken aloud or even just imagined speech directly from brain recordings, typically using electrocorticography, ECOG, where electrodes are placed on the surface of the brain. These decoding feats, which were pretty much unimaginable just a decade or two ago, powerfully demonstrate AI's unparalleled ability to decipher the brain's complex codes for representing information. And beyond the wow factor, they offer neuroscientists entirely new ways to study how information is encoded, processed, and transformed across different brain regions. It helps us start to understand the very language the brain uses to represent the world.
What else can AI do with real-time brain data beyond just decoding static images or words? Can it help us understand or even influence our dynamic brain states?
Definitely. AI models are increasingly capable of analyzing brain activity streams in real time, from EEG or fMRI, to classify dynamic mental states. For example, researchers have built classifiers that can determine, moment by moment, whether you're in a state of focused attention or if your mind is wandering. This has obvious implications for understanding learning, productivity, and even conditions like ADHD. Even more critically, AI algorithms can analyze ongoing EEG signals to predict significant neurological events, like the onset of an epileptic seizure potentially minutes before it occurs, giving a crucial warning.
That could be life-saving.
Absolutely. These predictive capabilities have immense clinical value for patient safety and enabling timely intervention. Furthermore, AI is becoming the core engine behind closed-loop neurofeedback systems.
Closed-loop neurofeedback, what does that involve?
It means your brain activity is measured in real time, analyzed by an AI, and then information about your brain state is fed back to you, maybe through visual displays, sounds, or even gentle brain stimulation. The goal is to train you to consciously self-regulate specific brain patterns associated with a particular condition or cognitive function. For instance, people might learn to increase brain rhythms associated with focus to help with ADHD, or decrease patterns linked to chronic pain or anxiety. AI makes the real-time analysis and targeted feedback possible.
So AI is not just helping us diagnose and decode, but also potentially helping us understand and even actively modulate our own brain activity in real time. That's a really powerful intersection.
It is. It opens up possibilities for personalized therapies and cognitive enhancement, driven by AI interpreting our neural signals.
Okay, let's talk about one of the most transformative ways AI is aiding neuroscience and directly impacting human lives. Brain-computer interfaces, or BCIs. This idea of direct communication between brains and machines sounds like pure sci-fi, but you're saying it's very real now.
It's definitely moved from science fiction into tangible reality, with accelerating progress in recent years. The fundamental challenge in building effective BCIs is neural decoding. That means accurately mapping the incredibly complex, noisy, and often shifting patterns of neural signals, like the firing of individual neurons or the rhythms of electrical fields, onto specific intended actions or messages that a computer or prosthetic device can understand.
It sounds like trying to translate a language you barely understand, spoken in a hurricane.
That's not a bad analogy. It's incredibly challenging. But modern AI, particularly sophisticated algorithms like deep recurrent neural networks, RNNs, which are well suited for processing sequential data like neural time series and other advanced sequence models, has dramatically improved the accuracy and speed of this decoding process. This has led to truly remarkable performance breakthroughs.
Can you give us a concrete example, maybe a breakthrough in motor BCIs, where AI helps someone control movement with their thoughts?
A really dramatic demonstration came in 2021 from researchers at Stanford and collaborating institutions. They worked with a participant who was fully paralyzed from the neck down due to spinal cord injury. He had microelectrode arrays implanted in the part of his motor cortex that controls hand and arm movements. Using an RNN-based AI decoder, he was able to handwrite text on a screen simply by thinking about writing each individual letter. The AI learned to distinguish the unique patterns of neural activity associated with the imagined intention to write each character.
He imagined writing, and the AI translated that thought into text.
Exactly. And the results were astounding. He achieved a typing speed of 90 characters per minute with over 94% accuracy.
90 characters per minute, that's huge. How does that compare to previous attempts?
It was more than double the previous record for typing with a BCI, which was around 40 characters per minute using point-and-click methods. And remarkably, 90 characters per minute starts to approach the speed of typical smartphone typing for able-bodied individuals. It allowed the participant to communicate at around 18 words per minute, restoring a vital channel for expression.
That's absolutely incredible. Essentially giving movement, or at least the expression of intended movement, back through thought alone, powered by AI.
What about speech? Is AI helping people who've lost their voice to communicate again?
Yes, speech BCIs have seen similarly stunning advances, also heavily reliant on AI decoding. In 2023, two major papers came out almost simultaneously demonstrating high-performance brain-to-text systems. One study, involving an ALS patient who could no longer speak, used high-density electrode arrays placed over her speech motor cortex. AI models, trained on her neural activity as she attempted to speak different words, were able to decode her intended speech at an average rate of 62 words per minute.
62 words per minute. How does that compare to normal conversation? Normal conversational speech is typically around 150 to 160 words per minute. So 62 words per minute isn't quite natural speed yet, but it's a massive leap forward. It's fast enough for meaningful, near real-time communication, far beyond previous speech BCI attempts. And the system had a relatively low error rate, around 23% on a large vocabulary.
Wow. Essentially giving a voice back to someone who can't speak. That's just profoundly moving. The humanitarian impact is hard to even grasp.
Precisely, and it gets even more sophisticated. Other research teams are now combining this neural decoding of intended speech with advanced generative AI voice models, the same kind of AI that can synthesize realistic voices. They're
Mm.
creating complete speech neuroprostheses. These systems not only decode the intended words from brain activity, but also output a synthetic voice that speaks those words in real time. Some systems even drive a realistic facial avatar that moves its lips and expressions in sync with the synthesized speech.
So it's not just text on a screen, it's potentially a synthesized voice and face.
Exactly. This is AI delivering truly profound humanitarian impact, aiming to restore the fundamental human capabilities of communication and self-expression for people with severe paralysis or speech loss.
Are BCIs purely about restoring lost functions like movement and speech? Or is there more to this field? Could they have applications beyond clinical rehabilitation?
While restoration is the primary focus now, the potential applications are broader. AI decoding is also enabling progress in neural prosthetics for other senses. For vision, researchers are working on systems that interpret signals from retinal implants or even directly from the visual cortex to create artificial sight for the blind, using AI to translate camera input into meaningful patterns of neural stimulation. For sensation, AI helps decode signals from prosthetic limbs equipped with sensors, allowing users to potentially feel texture or pressure through targeted nerve stimulation, creating more intuitive and functional bionic limbs.
And in basic research?
In basic neuroscience research, AI decoders are powerful tools. They help scientists test theories about how the brain encodes information. For instance, an AI decoder might predict, based solely on neural activity recorded from an animal's brain, whether the animal expects a reward, what specific image it's looking at, or what decision it's about to make. This allows researchers to rigorously test hypotheses about neural coding. Furthermore, AI is crucial for developing closed-loop neuromodulation systems, where specific patterns of neural activity detected by AI trigger responsive actions, like a smart neurostimulator detecting the signature of an impending seizure and delivering targeted electrical pulses to try and prevent it.
It's really incredible to think that companies like Neuralink, founded by Elon Musk and Synchron, are pushing this BCI technology forward so aggressively, heavily relying on AI in their approaches. It feels like it's moving closer to everyday reality.
Indeed. The common thread in all these advances is that sophisticated machine learning, particularly deep learning, can find the incredibly complex, often nonlinear mapping between high-dimensional neural signals and the information they carry, whether it's intended movement, speech, perception, or cognitive state. Even when that mapping is distributed across many neurons and changes over time. As we continue to refine these AI-powered neural decoding techniques, we move closer to an era of potentially seamless brain-machine integration. The initial focus is rightly on rehabilitation, but the long-term possibilities could extend to augmentation and fundamentally new ways of interacting with computers and the digital world, raising both excitement and important ethical considerations.
Let's talk about mapping the brain itself. It's often called the most complex object in the known universe. So the idea of mapping its entire wiring diagram, every single neuron and every single connection or synapse, sounds like an utterly impossible task. This field is called connectomics. How does AI make something so monumental even remotely feasible?
You're absolutely right. Connectomics is an incredibly ambitious endeavor. Charting the complete wiring diagram of even a relatively simple brain, let alone a human one with its 86 billion neurons and hundreds of trillions of synapses, is a monumental data challenge. Even mapping the brain of a tiny fruit fly, which has only about 100,000 neurons, generates petabytes of raw electron microscopy image data. That's millions of gigabytes. Trying to manually trace every wire in that haystack is simply not feasible.
So AI has to be the key enabler here.
It absolutely is. AI, specifically advanced machine vision algorithms like deep convolutional neural networks, is the core enabling technology that makes large-scale connectonics possible today.
How does the AI actually do it? How does it trace something so incredibly tiny and tangled within those massive data sets?
The typical workflow starts with preparing a small piece of brain tissue and slicing it into thousands upon thousands of incredibly thin sections, maybe just 30 nanometers thick. These slices are then imaged at very high resolution using electron microscopy. This process generates a massive stack of 2D grayscale images. Now, the AI comes in. Deep learning models are trained to perform image segmentation on these 2D slices.
Segmentation meaning outlining things.
Exactly. The AI learns to identify and trace the precise boundaries of every single neuron's cross-section, its axon, dendrites, cell body within each image slice. It also learns to identify and classify the tiny junctions between neurons, the synapses. Then, by computationally stitching these segmented 2D slices back together in 3D, the algorithms can reconstruct the full, intricate three-dimensional shape of individual neurons and map their connections across the entire volume.
It sounds like digitally reconstructing an impossibly complex bowl of spaghetti strand by individual strand.
That's a great analogy. Or like assembling billions of microscopic 3D jigsaw puzzle pieces. It's a task that is simply beyond manual human effort alone for anything larger than a minuscule brain region. AI provides the necessary automation and scale.
Have there been any really big successes recently in connectomics, major maps that were revealed thanks to AI?
Yes, there have been some truly landmark achievements in the last few years. In 2020, a large collaborative team, including researchers from Google and the Genelia Research Campus, published what was then the largest and most detailed connectome, a dense 3D map covering about one-third of the fruit fly brain. This hemibrain connectome mapped the pathways of roughly 25,000 neurons and identified about 20 million synaptic connections between them.
20 million connections traced. Just incredible.
It required automated AI algorithms to trace neural pathways through about 50 trillion voxels 3D pixels of image data, a monumental computational task.
And just very recently, in April 2025, something even bigger was published, right? This time for a mammalian brain. That sounds like another huge leap.
Yes, that was a truly landmark publication. A major consortium led by researchers at Princeton, Baylor College of Medicine, and the Allen Institute for Brain Science, and funded by the U.S. government's IRPA Microns S program, published the most detailed map of a mammalian brain region ever created. They meticulously mapped 1 cubic millimeter of the mouse visual cortex. Within that tiny volume, they reconstructed over 75,000 neurons and identified roughly 500 million synapses connecting them.
500 million synapses in a cubic millimeter.
It's an unprecedented level of detail for mammalian brain tissue. And again, this achievement was only possible through the heavy use of AI-powered segmentation algorithms to trace every neuronal process through tens of thousands of high-resolution electron microscopy images. It provides an incredibly rich data set linking the physical structure of neural circuits to their function, as they also recorded the activity of many of these neurons before mapping them.
It's fascinating, though, that even with AI doing so much of the heavy lifting, human proofreading and verification are still essential, right? The AI isn't perfect yet.
That's absolutely true. For the fruit fly connectome, for example, human experts spent literally years proofreading and correcting the AI's output. While AI dramatically accelerates the process by orders of magnitude, manual verification and correction remain crucial for ensuring the accuracy of these incredibly complex maps. But the AI does the vast majority of the initial tracing work.
Stepping back a bit, what's the big picture motivation behind these monumental, multi-year, multi-million-dollar connectome projects? What do they ultimately hope to reveal about intelligence or maybe about brain health?
The strategic motivation is really twofold, aiming to advance both fundamental neuroscience and next-generation artificial intelligence. From the neuroscience perspective, having these detailed wiring diagrams is foundational for understanding how neural circuits actually compute. It helps us study brain health and disease, for example. Are there specific miswirings or connection abnormalities associated with disorders like autism or schizophrenia? Understanding the normal blueprint is essential for identifying what goes wrong. At the same time, from the AI perspective, particularly for funders like IRPA, the Intelligence Advanced Research Projects activity, there's an explicit goal to reverse engineer the algorithms of the brain.
Reverse engineer the brain for better AI.
Exactly, because biological brains still vastly outperform current AI on many critical aspects of intelligence, things like learning efficiently, from very few examples, few-shot learning, adapting continuously to new situations without forgetting old knowledge, continual learning, common sense reasoning, and incredible energy efficiency. The hope is that by understanding the brain's circuit design principles, we can incorporate those principles into building more capable, robust, and efficient AI systems. So connectomics is a prime example of this neuro-AI synergy. We use cutting-edge AI to help us decode the brain's intricate wiring, and the knowledge gained from that wiring diagram may, in turn, feed back into designing more brain-like and ultimately more intelligent AI. We can definitely expect AI to play an even larger role in analyzing these enormous connectome datasets in the future, finding recurring wiring patterns, motifs, understanding network properties, and linking specific circuit structures to specific computational functions.
Okay, so AI isn't just about crunching the raw data from the brain or helping us build interfaces to it. It's also becoming a powerful theoretical tool in its own right, a way to actually test our ideas about how brains compute and how cognition emerges from neural activity.
Exactly. This is a really exciting and rapidly growing area. Using AI models, particularly deep neural networks, as direct computational models or proxies for brain function. For instance, in vision research, which we touched on earlier, deep convolutional networks, CNNs, trained purely on object recognition tasks like identifying cats and dogs in images, have been shown to spontaneously develop intermediate representations across their layers. And remarkably, these artificial representations closely match the patterns of activity observed in corresponding stages of the primate visual cortex as it processes images.
So you train an AI to do a task, like see objects, and without explicitly telling it to be like a brain, its internal workings start to actually resemble the brain's visual pathway. That's fascinating. It's like the AI is independently discovering some of the brain strategies.
It really is. Seminal work by researchers like Jim DiCarlo and colleagues at MIT famously demonstrated this. They showed that the activation patterns layer by layer within a deep network trained on ImageNet could predict the neural responses recorded from monkey IT cortex, a high-level visual area, better than any previous hand-engineered computational model. This approach, sometimes called brain score benchmarking, treats AI networks as candidate models of brain computation. You assess how well an AI model's internal states match brain states during the same task. It creates this virtuous cycle. As AI models get better at performing a cognitive task, like object recognition, they often become more brain-like in their internal processing.
Which then suggests that maybe, just maybe, the biological brain is performing a similar kind of computation to solve that task.
Precisely. It gives neuroscientists concrete, testable hypotheses about the algorithms the brain might be using.
What about higher-level cognitive functions, beyond just perception? Things like memory or planning or decision-making. Can AI models help us understand those too?
Yes, AI is increasingly being used to simulate and model those higher cognitive functions as well. Recurrent neural networks, RNNs, especially variants like LSTMs or GRUs, which are good at handling sequences and maintaining internal states, have been employed to model aspects of working memory, sequence processing, and even decision-making processes observed in the brain, particularly in the prefrontal cortex. Scientists can train these RNNs on the same behavioral tasks that animals perform in laboratory experiments, like navigating a maze or making choices based on learned rules. Then they can analyze how the artificial network solves the task, what kind of internal representations or dynamics it uses, and compare that directly to neural recordings from the corresponding brain areas in the animal performing the same task.
So you're comparing the AI's thought process to the animal's brain activity.
In a sense, yes. It helps bridge the gap between the observed behavior, the what, and the underlying neural mechanism, the how. For example, reinforcement learning agents are often used to model animal learning. Researchers might compare the behavior and the evolution of internal value signals in an RL agent navigating a virtual maze with the behavior and neural activity patterns recorded from a real rat's hippocampus or basal ganglia in a real maze. They might check if the agent's internal map or policy network corresponds mathematically to the representations found in the rat's brain.
And what about the giants of AI today, large language models like GPT-4 or its successors? Are they also being used as models to understand human cognition, specifically how we process language? They seem incredibly good at mimicking human language.
Yes, absolutely. This is a very hot area of research right now. LLMs are being actively examined as potential computational models for the human language system. Researchers are feeding the same sentences or text passages to both an LLM and human participants whose brain activity is being recorded using fMRI or electrophysiology. Then they compare the LLM's internal activation patterns, how different neurons or layers in the model respond to the patterns of activity observed in the brain's language regions, like Broca's or Wernicke's areas. Early studies are finding some intriguing, though often moderate, correlations. It suggests there's some alignment between how LLMs process linguistic information and how the brain does, although the brain clearly exhibits additional complex dynamics like strong predictive coding and sophisticated integration of world knowledge that current LLMs might lack or implement differently.
So maybe LLMs capture some aspects of language processing, but not the whole picture yet.
That seems to be the current consensus. In the broader field of cognitive science, researchers also use AI-based cognitive architectures. These are more complex models that try to integrate different AI components, maybe neural networks for perception, symbolic reasoning systems for logic and planning, memory stores into a unified framework that can simulate a wider range of human cognitive tasks. Models like ACTR, which is a hybrid symbolic architecture, or SPAWN, which is a large-scale spiking neural model, serve as computational testbeds for comprehensive theories of cognition. Researchers can simulate psychological experiments within these architectures to validate our understanding of interacting cognitive processes.
So, stepping back, what does all this mean for us? How does using AI as a theoretical tool actually deepen our understanding of our own intelligence? What's the payoff?
The payoff is that AI isn't just a tool for analyzing data or building useful applications anymore. It's becoming a fundamental way we think about how brains compute and how intelligence arises. By constructing artificial systems that can exhibit brain-like behaviors or solve cognitive tasks in ways that seem analogous to how brains might do it, scientists can generate much more precise, quantitative, and testable hypotheses about the real brain's algorithms and representations. This convergence of brain science and AI modeling is creating a powerful new paradigm. We're essentially using brain-inspired AI to simulate, probe, and thereby understand brain function. And conversely, we're using detailed empirical data from neuroscience to constrain, validate, and improve our AI models. It brings us closer to potentially explaining intelligence, both natural and artificial, within a common computational framework. That's really the grand challenge and the exciting promise of this field.
Okay, so we've explored how the brain inspires AI and how AI helps us study the brain. It feels like we need to really compare them side by side. How similar are biological brains and artificial neural networks, really? Are we
Yeah.
getting close to building truly brain-like AI, or are the differences still fundamental and vast?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's central to this whole convergence. The sources we looked at provide a pretty detailed comparison, and they highlight both some truly remarkable parallels, but also some absolutely crucial divergences between biological neural networks, BNNs, or just brains, and artificial neural networks, ANNs. It's definitely not just a matter of scale. There are fundamental differences in their operating principles.
Okay, let's break it down. Maybe start with the basic unit, the neuron itself.
Right. The neuron model. Biological neurons are incredibly complex electrochemical devices. They have intricate 3D structures with dendrites receiving inputs, a cell body integrating them, and an axon transmitting outputs. They integrate signals from thousands of synapses, exhibiting complex nonlinear dynamics, and critically, most communicate using discrete electrical pulses spikes and come in a huge diversity of types, each with different properties.
And artificial neurons.
Artificial neurons and standard ANNs are typically much simpler mathematical abstractions. Often just a weighted sum of inputs passed through a static nonlinear activation function like ReLU or sigmoid. Most are non-spiking, just outputting a continuous value. Even the neurons in spiking neural networks, SNNs, which are designed to be more biologically realistic, are still significant simplifications of the biophysical complexity of real neurons.
Okay, difference number one, complexity of the basic unit. What about how signals are sent between them? Signal transmission.
Big difference there, too. Brains use those pulsatile, asynchronous spikes action potentials traveling along axons. Information is encoded not just in the rate of spiking, but crucially in the precise timing of spikes, both individually and relative to each other. It's relatively slow, working on a millisecond timescale, but it's massively parallel.
ANNs?
Standard ANNs typically operate in synchronous, discrete time steps. All the units in one layer compute their output and then pass those real-valued activations simultaneously to the next layer. Information is mainly encoded in the magnitude of the activation signal. They generally lack an explicit notion of spike timing, unless they are SNNs.
The overall structure, the network topology, must also be vastly different, right? The brain isn't just layers like many ANNs.
Absolutely. The human brain is this incredibly intricate, three-dimensional structure with around 86 billion neurons. The connectivity is complex, it's sparse locally, neurons connect mainly to nearby ones, but also features crucial long-range connections between different brain regions. It's highly organized into specialized areas like visual cortex, motor cortex, hippocampus, with specific architectures. And critically, its massively recurrent connections loop back on themselves everywhere, which is thought to be vital for things like memory and sustained activity.
Whereas ANNs are often flatter.
Often, yes. Classic deep ANNs are typically organized into discrete layers in a predominantly feed-forward fashion, although sometimes hundreds of layers deep. Newer architectures like transformers have more complex connectivity patterns based on attention, and recurrent networks, RNNs, explicitly include loops. But generally, ANNs lack the sheer scale of neurons and synapses, the 3D spatial embedding, and the extensive complex recurrent architecture seen in biological brains.
Okay, now let's talk about learning. The synapses and plasticity. How do the connections actually change in brains versus AI?
This is perhaps one of the biggest and most important divergences. Each biological neuron can have thousands, maybe tens of thousands, of synapses. These aren't just simple weights. They are complex biochemical machines whose strength can change through a multitude of mechanisms. We have Hebbian plasticity, fire together, wire together, spike timing dependent plasticity, STDP, where the relative timing of pre- and postsynaptic spikes matters hugely, homeostatic plasticity that keeps activity stable, and neuromodulation where chemicals like dopamine or acetylcholine can globally change learning rules or synaptic strength. And crucially, much of this plasticity seems to be local, relying on signals available only at or near the synapse itself.
Sounds incredibly complex and dynamic. How does that compare to ANNs?
In most ANNs, the connection is just represented by a single scalar value, the weight. And the primary way these weights are adjusted is through the backpropagation algorithm we mentioned earlier. Backprop calculates how much each weight in the entire network contributed to the final error using gradient descent. It's a highly effective optimization technique that requires global information about the error signal to be sent backwards through the network.
Which, as you said, is not biologically plausible.
Yeah.
You don't think the brain does global backpropagation.
Exactly. It's highly effective for training AI, but it's a major point of difference from biological learning. There's a lot of research trying to develop more biologically plausible local learning rules for ANNs inspired by mechanisms like STDP, but backpropagation is still the dominant method.
So the way they learn, their learning paradigms, are also quite distinct, flowing from these mechanisms. Brain seems so much better at learning quickly from a few examples.
Indeed. Brains are masters of learning from the environment. They primarily use unsupervised or self-supervised learning, constantly extracting statistical regularities, building predictive models of the world from unlabeled sensory input. They also use reinforcement learning, guided by those dopamine-mediated reward prediction errors. And critically, as you said, brains excel at few-shot learning, generalizing rapidly from just one or a few examples, and continual learning, learning new things throughout life without catastrophically forgetting old knowledge.
Catastrophic forgetting, that's a big problem for AI, right?
Yeah.
Train it on a new task and it forgets the old one.
It's a major challenge. ANNs, by contrast, are predominantly trained using supervised learning on massive labeled datasets. While self-supervised learning and deep RL are making huge strides in AI, few-shot learning and mitigating catastrophic forgetting remain significant hurdles. Techniques like experience replay, inspired by the hippocampus, as we discussed, or elastic weight consolidation offer partial solutions, but they don't fully match the brain's seamless lifelong learning ability.
Okay, what about computational efficiency? This seems like a huge win for biology.
It's a massive win. The human brain performs its incredible feats using only about 20 watts of power. That's astounding efficiency. It likely stems from the brain's use of sparse spike coding. Most neurons are silent most of the time. It's event-driven processing. Computation only happens when spikes arrive. And it's massively parallel architecture with memory and processing tightly interwoven.
And ANNs, especially large ones.
Training large, deep learning models and even running inference on them can be incredibly energy intensive, often requiring specialized hardware like GPUs or TPUs that consume kilowatts or even megawatts in large data centers. While digital circuits are very fast at performing simple arithmetic operations, their traditional von Neumann architecture, separating memory and processing, and synchronous clock-driven operation make them inherently less power efficient for the kinds of massively parallel, sparse computations the brain seems to excel at. Neuromorphic chips are specifically trying to bridge this energy gap by mimicking the brain's architecture.
How about memory storage? Is AI memory like brain memory?
Quite different. In the brain, memory isn't stored in one place like a computer's hard drive. It seems to be distributed across the patterns of connections, synaptic weights, throughout the brain, and also potentially stored in dynamic patterns of neural activity. Memory recall is often thought to be a reconstructive process, not just retrieving a static file. And the brain has multiple distinct memory systems: short-term working memory, episodic memory for events, semantic memory for facts, procedural memory for skills, that interact in complex ways.
And ANNs.
In ANNs, learned information is primarily stored in the matrix of connection weights. It's distributed, but doesn't have the same rich structure or reconstructive properties as brain memory. While some AI architectures incorporate forms of external memory or attention mechanisms inspired by working memory, they generally struggle to integrate new information seamlessly into long-term storage without extensive retraining or specific architectures designed for continual learning.
And what about robustness and fault tolerance? The brain seems pretty resilient.
That's right. The brain is remarkably robust to noise, damage, and the death of individual neurons. It happens constantly. Its function tends to degrade gracefully rather than failing catastrophically, thanks to massive redundancy, distributed representations, and plasticity mechanisms that can help compensate for damage.
But deep networks can be brittle.
They can be surprisingly brittle. They can be highly susceptible to adversarial examples, tiny, almost imperceptible changes to the input that cause the network to make completely wrong classifications. They also lack the brain's capacity for adaptive self-repair. While research into robust AI is ongoing, current deep networks generally don't match the brain's resilience.
Finally, development and adaptation. Brains aren't programmed. They grow and wire themselves up and keep changing.
Exactly. The brain undergoes a complex process of genetically guided self-organization during development, heavily influenced by neural activity and sensory experience, for example, synaptic pruning. It continues to adapt and rewire itself throughout life in response to learning and changes in the environment, lifelong plasticity.
How do ANNs develop?
ANNs typically develop through the process of training, optimizing their weights on a given dataset, using algorithms like gradient descent. Their architecture is usually fixed beforehand by the human designer. Once trained, most ANNs are relatively static. They don't spontaneously grow new connections or neurons. While fields like meta-learning and neural architecture search aim to give ANNs more adaptability or automate design, they are still quite far from the biological brain's intricate developmental program and lifelong self-modification.
And lastly, interpretability. Are both as black boxes?
That's actually one area with some similarity, interestingly. Understanding exactly how a specific computation is implemented across millions or billions of neurons in the brain is incredibly difficult, even for neuroscientists. We can map functions to brain regions, but the detailed algorithmic level is often elusive. Similarly, understanding precisely why a large, deep neural network makes a particular decision can be very challenging, hence the term black box AI. Techniques like saliency mapping or feature visualization try to peer inside, but full interpretability is often lacking for complex models in both domains. Progress in understanding one might actually help understand the other. So putting it all together, this comparison really underscores a key point. While current AI is profoundly inspired by neuroscience, it is fundamentally not a direct copy of the brain. It leverages some core principles, but simplifies or abstracts away much of the biological complexity. And that difference is both AI's strength, leading to simpler, more mathematically tractable, and scalable systems, and potentially its weakness, as it might be omitting crucial ingredients for achieving the brain's remarkable efficiency, flexibility, and general intelligence.
So the goal isn't necessarily to build an exact replica of the brain, brick by biological like, but perhaps to understand the brain's principles well enough to capture the essence of its intelligence, taking the best of both worlds.
Precisely. It's about identifying the key computational principles that give rise to biological intelligence, whether it's the hierarchical processing, the learning rules, the energy efficiency, the robustness, and then finding ways to implement those principles effectively, perhaps even more powerfully, using the tools of computation and engineering. The ongoing convergence aims to combine the brain's efficient, flexible, adaptive intelligence with AI's speed, scale, and data handling capabilities to forge entirely new architectures of intelligence that surpass the limitations of either approach alone.
To really appreciate this incredible convergence, it feels like we need to look back at the history. Because as you said, it's this story of constant back and forth, inspiration sparking innovation, bouncing between neuroscience labs and AI research. Let's maybe walk through some of those landmark moments that really highlight this interplay.
Absolutely. Looking at the timeline really drives home how intertwined these fields have been, often without people even realizing it at the time. Here's a brief journey through some key milestones. We start way back in 1943. McCulloch and Pitts published their paper on a logical calculus of neural activity. It's the first formal mathematical model of a neuron, laying the conceptual groundwork for artificial neural networks.
So the very seed of the idea, thinking about neurons as computational units.
Then, 1949, Donald Hebb proposes his theory of synaptic plasticity, neurons that fire together, wire together. This introduces the fundamental idea of activity-dependent learning and profoundly inspires learning rules in AI, especially unsupervised learning.
A core principle of how connections might strengthen, straight from thinking about biology.
1958. Frank Rosenblatt builds the perceptron. It's one of the very first hardware implementations of a learning neural network, and he explicitly models it after the eye's retina and brain neurons for image recognition tasks.
Taking the abstract idea and building a machine that could actually learn from data inspired by the visual system.
Jump to the 1960s, specifically 62-65. Neuroscientists Hubel and Wiesel conduct their Nobel Prize-winning research identifying hierarchical feature detectors in the mammalian visual cortex simple cells, complex cells. These findings directly influence the design of later AI vision systems.
Uncovering the brain's layered strategy for making sense of visual information.
1981. Inspired by Hubel and Wiesel's work, Kunihiko Fukushima designs the neocognitron. This introduces the core architecture of convolutional neural networks, CNNs, with multiple layers, local receptive fields, and pooling specifically for visual pattern recognition, a direct precursor to modern deep CNNs.
The first real architectural bridge translating the neuroscience discovery into an AI model structure.
1986. The backpropagation algorithm for training multi-layer networks is popularized, though invented earlier. This provides a powerful general method for training deeper networks and reinvigorates AI research in neural networks, even though backprop itself isn't considered biologically plausible.
Giving AI a powerful, albeit maybe artificial way to learn complex patterns, unlocking deeper networks.
Fast forward to 1997. A pivotal paper by Schultz, Dayan, and Montague shows that the firing of dopamine neurons in the primate brain encodes a reward prediction error signal, precisely mirroring the teaching signal used in reinforcement learning theories like TD learning. This creates a tight formal link between the neuroscience of learning and AI's reinforcement learning framework.
A stunning biological validation, finding the brain's own implementation of a key concept from AI learning theory.
2012, this is a huge one. AlexNet, a deep convolutional neural network designed by Krzyzewski, Sutskever, and Hinton, wins the ImageNet image recognition competition by a massive margin. Trained on GPUs, its success ignites the modern deep learning revolution, showcasing the power of brain-inspired CNN architectures at scale.
The moment deep learning exploded onto the scene, largely powered by architectures with roots in neuroscience.
2013. Two major things happen. The U.S. Brain Initiative and Europe's Human Brain Project are launched, representing massive government investments in understanding the brain, with a strong emphasis on using computation and AI to analyze the resulting data. Also around this time, DeepMind develops its DeepQ network, DQN, published fully in 2015, which masterfully combines deep neural networks with reinforcement learning, notably using experience replay, a technique inspired by hippocampal replay in the brain.
Huge public investment signaling the importance of this convergence, alongside a key AI breakthrough leveraging a brain memory concept.
2014. IBM unveils its True North neuromorphic chip. While a research project, it demonstrates the potential for building hardware with millions of spiking neurons that operate with brain-like energy efficiency.
Hardware starting to physically mimic the brain's low-power spiking nature.
2015. Yamins and DiCarlo at MIT published their influential work showing that the internal representations in deep CNNs trained on object recognition can predict neural responses in the monkey visual cortex better than previous models. This significantly strengthens the link, suggesting ANNs can serve as predictive models of brain function.
Providing strong evidence that optimizing AI for a task can lead it to discover brain-like computational solutions.
2017. A landmark year. The transformer architecture is introduced in the paper, Attention is All You Need, relying entirely on self-attention mechanisms. While not directly modeled on a specific brain circuit, it embodies the cognitive concept of selective focus. Also, DeepMind CEO Demis Hassabis and colleagues published a review article explicitly titled Neuroscience-Inspired Artificial Intelligence, articulating the strategic importance of this interplay.
Attention takes AI by storm, enabling models like GPT, while key AI leaders formally champion the neuroscience connection.
2018. DeepMind demonstrates a reinforcement learning agent navigating a virtual environment that spontaneously develops internal representations resembling the grid cells found in the mammalian entorhinal cortex, suggesting convergent computational principles for spatial navigation.
AI independently rediscovering a fundamental coding scheme used by the brain for mapping space.
2020. Google and the Genelia Research Canvas released the Drosophila hemibrain connectome, that incredibly detailed map of a large part of the fruit fly brain, made possible only by using AI for automated image segmentation.
AI enabling neuroscientists to map brain circuits at an unprecedented scale and detail.
2021, a major BCI breakthrough. A paralyzed man achieves thought-controlled typing at 90 characters per minute by imagining handwriting, decoded using sophisticated AI algorithms, RNNs.
AI directly translating thoughts into communication at near-practical speeds, a profound clinical application.
2023, another BCI landmark. High-performance speech neuroprocesses are demonstrated, decoding intended speech directly from brain activity at rates like 62 words per minute, often combined with generative AI to synthesize the corresponding voice.
The giving voice back to the voiceless, a powerful combination of neural decoding and generative AI.
And most recently, April 2025. The Micromes Consortium publishes their connectomic map of the mouse visual cortex, the most detailed reconstruction of mammalian brain tissue circuitry ever achieved. Again, heavily reliant on state-of-the-art AI for segmentation and analysis.
Pushing the frontiers of brain mapping further, with AI as the essential tool, aiming to unlock secrets relevant to both neuroscience and future AI.
Phew. That timeline, I think, dramatically illustrates this dynamic interplay. Progress often leaps forward when insights or tools from one field are applied to the other, and you can really see how the pace has dramatically accelerated in the last 10-15 years, driven by deep learning, better neurotechnologies, and large-scale brain projects. It truly feels like we're in the midst of a neuro-AI era.
Absolutely. That history makes the current synergy feel much more concrete. So, looking ahead now, what does this accelerating convergence actually look like in the next 5 to 10 years? What kind of breakthroughs or trends can we realistically expect as these fields continue to intertwine even more deeply? Where is this all headed?
It's always tricky to predict the future, especially in such fast-moving fields, but based on current trajectories and ongoing research, we can anticipate several major trends that are likely to define the next decade of neuro-AI. Firstly, I think we'll see more brain-like AI architectures. Researchers are increasingly looking to biological intelligence to overcome some of AI's current limitations. A big one is continual learning.
Right, avoiding that catastrophic forgetting problem.
Exactly. The brain learns new things constantly without wiping out old knowledge. AI models struggle with this, so we might see AI architectures incorporating principles like modularity, different parts specializing, like brain regions, perhaps neuromodulation, using simulated chemicals to gate learning or switch contexts, or more sophisticated memory systems inspired by the hippocampus that allow for rapid encoding and consolidation of new information without disrupting existing knowledge. There's also growing interest in things like sparse distributed representations, how the brain seems to encode info efficiently and robustly, and metaplasticity, learning how to learn, to improve AI's flexibility and generalization.
So AI becoming less monolithic, maybe more structured and adaptable, taking cues from brain organization.
That's the hope, to build AI that learns more like we do. Secondly, expect significant progress in energy-efficient and neuromorphic AI. As we discuss, the energy cost of large-scale AI is becoming a major bottleneck, and traditional silicon scaling, Moore's law, is slowing down. This provides a huge incentive to develop hardware that operates closer to the brain's incredible power efficiency. Neuromorphic chips, like Intel's Louis 2 or IBM's North Pole, will likely mature, become more programmable, and scale to handle larger, more complex spiking neural networks. In 5–10 years, it's plausible we might see neuromorphic systems capable of running SNNs with complexity roughly equivalent to a small mammal's brain, like a rodent.
What would that enable?
It could enable sophisticated AI to run continuously and adaptively right on edge devices. Think advanced robotics, autonomous drones that learn in the field, smart wearables that process complex biosignals, or even brain-implantable BCI chips that do some learning directly on the device, reducing power consumption and latency. This creates a tighter feedback loop. Learn more about brain circuits, build chips that mimic them, leading to more capable, low-power AI.
Okay, and flipping the coin again, what about AI-powered neuroscience breakthroughs? How will AI continue to revolutionize our ability to study the brain itself?
AI's role in neuroscience will only grow. On the connectomics front, with further improvements in AI-driven image analysis, mapping the entire brain of a small mammal like a mouse at synaptic resolution might become feasible within the next decade, perhaps by the early 2030s. That would be an absolute treasure trove, a Rosetta Stone for understanding vertebrate brain organization. Beyond just structure, AI will be crucial for integrating incredibly diverse types of brain data, combining anatomy from connectomics with recordings of neural activity like calcium imaging or high-density electrophysiology, and even data about gene expression at the single-cell level. AI models will help us find the hidden relationships between structure, activity, genes, and behavior, potentially revealing entirely new principles of neural coding or circuit function that could, in turn, inspire new AI algorithms.
And in terms of applications like BCIs,
We can expect continued rapid progress there, driven by better AI decoders. It's plausible that within 5–10 years, we'll see speech BCIs approaching natural conversation speeds and accuracy for people who need them. Maybe significant advances in visual prosthetics, providing more detailed artificial vision for the blind. And closed-loop neuromodulation therapies using AI to analyze brain states and deliver targeted stimulation for conditions like epilepsy, Parkinson's, or even depression will likely become much smarter, more personalized, and more effective.
and what about tackling the really deep questions, understanding higher-order cognition reasoning, planning, abstract thought? Will the neuro-AI connection help us there?
That's another major frontier. Cognitive AI and theories of intelligence. Current AI, even large language models, still struggles with robust, human-like reasoning, planning, and common sense. One approach is to build more integrated AI systems, sometimes called cognitive architectures, that explicitly try to combine the strengths of different approaches. Maybe deep learning for perception and pattern recognition, integrated with symbolic reasoning mechanisms for logic and planning, perhaps guided by neuroscience insights into how brain regions like the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus interact to support these functions. The aim is to create AI that can reason and solve problems in a more flexible, generalizable, human-like way. Conversely, cognitive neuroscientists will increasingly use these sophisticated AI models as computational testbeds to refine their theories about how the human brain achieves complex feats like compositional reasoning, building complex thoughts from simpler parts, analogy making, or understanding others' mental states, theory of mind.
Could studying how children learn provide clues for AI?
Absolutely. There's growing interest in developmental AI, looking at how human children learn so efficiently, often through active exploration, play, and social interaction, with seemingly innate biases or priors. Incorporating these principles might lead to AI agents that can learn much more rapidly and robustly in open-ended, real-world environments, moving beyond just pattern recognition on static datasets. Similarly, understanding the brain's mechanisms for long-term memory consolidation, like the role of sleep and replay, might be key to finally solving AI's catastrophic forgetting problem. So the overarching strategic vision, held by many leaders in both fields, really is this powerful virtuous cycle. We use AI to help us decode the brain's secrets, its circuits, its codes, its learning rules. We then take those biological insights and incorporate them into building better, smarter, more efficient, and perhaps more general AI systems. Those improved AI tools then allow us to probe the brain even more deeply and effectively.
A self-accelerating loop.
Exactly. A self-accelerating loop that could potentially drive exponential progress towards achieving both artificial general intelligence, AGI, AI, with human-like cognitive abilities across a wide range of tasks, and finally, a deep mechanistic understanding of natural intelligence itself, cracking the code of our own minds. It's an incredibly exciting prospect for the next decade and beyond.
It really is. Now, who are the key players driving this? If someone listening wants to follow this work more closely, which institutions or labs are really at the forefront of this neuro-AI frontier globally?
That's a great question. It's definitely a global effort with fantastic research happening in many places, but certain organizations and universities have emerged as particularly strong hubs where neuroscience and AI actively intersect. One standout is DeepMind in London, UK. As we've mentioned, they've been explicitly neuroscience inspired since their founding. Many of their top researchers have backgrounds in computational neuroscience, and they actively publish work that bridges the two fields, whether it's modeling hippocampal function, using RL inspired by dopamine, or developing AI architectures based on attention or memory principles.
They seem to live and breathe this convergence.
They really do. Another major powerhouse is MIT, particularly its Brain and Cognitive Sciences, BCS department, and the Center for Brains, Minds, and Machines, CBMM. CBMM is an NSF-funded center explicitly focused on the science and engineering of intelligence, bringing together neuroscientists, cognitive scientists, and AI researchers. Figures like Jim DiCarlo, vision modeling, and Tommaso Poggio, a pioneer in both computational neuroscience and machine learning theory, are based there. Then you have the Allen Institute for Brain Science in Seattle. Founded by Paul Allen, they are leaders in creating large-scale, high-quality data sets about the brain, like detailed gene expression maps and, of course, connectomes. They develop sophisticated machine learning tools internally to analyze this data and are key collaborators in projects like Microns. Their open science philosophy makes their data and tools invaluable to the global community.
So generating the crucial data and the tools to analyze it.
Exactly. Stanford University is another major player, with world-leading groups in both neuroscience, especially systems neuroscience and neuroengineering, and AI, through its computer science department and the Institute for Human-Centered AI. We talked about the groundbreaking BCI work, led by Krishno and Jamie Henderson there, which heavily relies on AI decoding. In the UK, besides DeepMind, University College London, UCL, has exceptional strength, particularly the Gatsby Computational Neuroscience Unit and the Wellcome Center for Human Neuroimaging. They have a long tradition of research at the interface of machine learning theory, especially Bayesian methods, and neural modeling.
You mentioned Baylor College of Medicine in Houston regarding the Microns project.
Yes, they are doing pioneering work led by people like Andreas Tolias, using large-scale recordings in AI to understand the relationship between cortical circuit structure and function. They have a dedicated center for neuroscience and artificial intelligence. We should also mention Carnegie Mellon University, CMU, and the University of Pittsburgh, which jointly run the Center for the Neural Basis of Cognition, CNBC, another long-standing center bridging these fields, often with a focus on cognitive and clinical applications. CMU's machine learning department is also world-class. And on the West Coast, the University of California, Berkeley, particularly through centers like the Redwood Center for Theoretical Neuroscience, has strong groups focused on theoretical models of brain computation, often leveraging deep learning. Jack Gallant's lab there did some of the famous fMRI decoding work we discussed.
So a lot of academic centers. What about industry and international initiatives?
Absolutely. Beyond academia, you have major international projects like the EU's Human Brain Project, now eBrains, and the ongoing U.S. Brain Initiative, both funding research and technology development at this intersection. In industry, besides DeepMind, which is owned by Google, companies like Neuralink and Synchron are pushing the envelope on invasive BCIs. Meta AI has also published significant work on neural decoding. IBM Research has a long history in neuromorphic computing and neurosynaptic algorithms. Intel Labs drives the Loihi neuromorphic platform and the associated Lava software framework. And there are various startups, like Numenta, specifically focused on developing AI based on neuroscientific principles like sparse coding derived from the neocortex.
It really underscores that point you made earlier about the Micron's Connectome project involving 150 researchers across 22 institutions. This is truly a large-scale, collaborative, and increasingly global endeavor.
It has to be, given the scale and complexity of the challenges involved in understanding the brain and replicating its intelligence. And maybe as a final important strategic aside here, amidst all this incredible progress and potential, it's absolutely crucial that we also acknowledge and proactively address the new ethical questions raised by this neuro-AI convergence.
That's a really important point. What are some of those key ethical concerns that we as a society really need to be thinking about as this technology advances?
They fall into a few categories. On one hand, when AI is applied directly to brain data, especially through technologies like advanced BCIs or sophisticated neural decoding, it touches on profound issues of mind privacy, personal identity, and consent. If we can decode thoughts, intentions, or emotional states with increasing fidelity, how do we protect an individual's mental privacy? Who owns or controls that incredibly sensitive neural data? What are the ethical boundaries for using technologies that can read from or even write to the brain? Could it be used for surveillance or manipulation? These are huge questions.
And the issue of augmentation versus therapy.
Exactly. Where do we draw the line between using neuro AI for restoring lost function and using it for enhancing cognitive abilities beyond the typical human range? What are the societal implications of potential cognitive inequalities if such enhancements become available? On the other hand, when we use brain inspiration to build more powerful and potentially more human-like AI, it raises different but equally complex ethical questions. If AI systems start to genuinely emulate human cognitive processes, learning, and maybe even subjective experience, what is their moral status? Do highly advanced brain-inspired AIs deserve certain rights or considerations? This borders on questions about AI consciousness, which are deeply philosophical but might become more pressing as AI becomes more biologically inspired.
And you mentioned the black box problem earlier for both brains and AI. Does combining them make that worse?
It can definitely exacerbate the challenge. When we have complex AI interpreting complex brain data, or when a brain like AI makes critical decisions, say in autonomous driving or medical diagnosis, ensuring transparency, accountability, and interpretability becomes even more vital and potentially even harder. We need to be able to understand and trust these combined systems. The good news is that the research community is increasingly aware of these ethical dimensions. There are active efforts to incorporate ethics by design principles into neurotechnology and AI development, for instance, designing BCIs that prioritize user agency and control, developing AI algorithms that are more inherently interpretable, and fostering interdisciplinary collaborations that include ethicists, social scientists, and legal scholars alongside the engineers and neuroscientists. Ensuring these powerful technologies are developed and deployed responsibly is a critical strategic imperative for the field.
Absolutely crucial. So wrapping things up, we've taken a really deep dive today into this remarkable and clearly accelerating reciprocal relationship between artificial intelligence and neuroscience. We've seen how the brain's own architecture, its neurons, its synapses, its hierarchical processing, its learning rules, even its mechanisms for attention and reward sparked the very foundations of AI. It provided the initial blueprints. And then we saw how AI is now powerfully enabling neuroscience, becoming an indispensable tool for mapping brain circuits in connectomics, decoding thoughts and intentions with BCIs, diagnosing brain disorders, and even serving as computational models to test our theories about how the brain computes and gives rise to cognition. It's unlocking secrets that were simply unimaginable just a short time ago.
Exactly. This virtuous cycle, where discoveries in one field fuel advances in the other, is truly transformative. It's not just changing the landscape of brain science or AI research in isolation, it's fundamentally reshaping our potential. It's leading towards building smarter, more efficient, more adaptable AI that could help us tackle some of humanity's biggest challenges, from personalized medicine to understanding climate change. It's driving the development of better diagnostics and therapies for devastating neurological and psychiatric disorders. And ultimately, it's moving us closer, step by painstaking step, towards a unified scientific understanding of intelligence itself, cracking the code of both biological minds and artificial ones.
That grand challenge, understanding intelligence in all its forms, feels perhaps a little less daunting, maybe a bit more tractable, now that these two incredibly powerful fields are joining sources so explicitly.
I think that's right. The brain inspired the computer, the very idea of computation in many ways. Now, the computer, amplified by AI, is illuminating the brain like never before. It leaves us with some profound questions to ponder, doesn't it? What entirely new forms of intelligence, perhaps blending biological and artificial principles, might emerge when this synergy truly blossoms in the coming decades? And how will that fundamentally redefine our understanding of what it means to be intelligent, to learn, to perceive, even to be human? The journey has really only just begun, and you, our listeners, are now hopefully much better equipped to understand its trajectory and its incredible potential.
We certainly hope this deep dive has given you a powerful shortcut to being well informed on this truly incredible frontier where minds and machines meet. Keep learning, keep questioning the future, and join us next time on The Deep Dive.